They say Earth burned so bright it blinded the gods. Then we choked it in smoke and silence. I never saw it. Not really. My mother used to show me old vids, grainy recordings of oceans, birds, leaves dancing in the wind, things I could barely comprehend. I was born in orbit above what used to be the North Atlantic. Now it's just a debris field, rusted satellites, station husks, half-melted monuments to the species we were before we lost the only home that ever loved us. We live in the bones of our past. I was born on Kestrel Station, a third-generation orbital habitat that creaks like an old man's knees and smells faintly of copper and sweat. Population: 1,342 humans, and twice as many machines that hate us a little more each day. We're one of a dozen such stations floating in high orbit around the Earth graveyard. Other species pass through the system sometimes: traders, pirates, scavengers, missionaries. The Draymari come most often. They call themselves stewards, but we know better. There are jailers. I was in Dock Section C when everything changed. I worked maintenance, not glamorous, but honest. You learn to love the rhythm of it, the soft hiss of coolant lines, the drone of turbines, the echo of your own breath in a suit barely older than you are. There's a comfort in routine, until something breaks. Jace, my combust. It was Aaron, the overseer. Sector 14B just redlined. We've got a coolant leak behind the outer panels. Get it fixed. On it, I replied, sealing my suit and grabbing my kit. I launched from the airlock with the kind of practiced ease that comes from a lifetime in zero-G. The stars stretched endlessly above, mocking me with their indifference. Below, Earth's remnants glinted like glass shards in sunlight. I never got used to that. The breach was minor, a stress fracture from thermal expansion. Nothing unusual. I began patching it, sealing microfractures with polymer gel, when my glove brushed something odd. A shape burned into the underside of the panel. Circular. A pattern. No. A symbol. I froze. It wasn't part of the ship, not etched by laser, or where. It was too deliberate. Intricate curves spiraled inward, connecting jagged runes like ancient circuitry. My HUD flagged it as unidentified surface anomaly. But my heart knew better. It felt familiar, like a word I'd heard in a dream, just at the edge of waking. Before I realized what I was doing, my fingers traced it. My breath caught as static licked the inside of my suit. My pulse spiked. Then, a flash. Light exploded around me, blinding, white-hot. My suit screamed errors. I was tumbling through vacuum, flailing as my vision spun. Something bloomed behind my eyes, burning and writhing like molten ink. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. Silence. I floated in the void, shaking. The symbol still hovered in my mind, etched into the dark like an afterimage. I didn't know it then, but that was the first time I touched the fold. They quarantined me, of course. Radiation, they said. Possibly a temporal echo. Minor exposure. I said nothing. How could I explain what I saw, what I felt? I began dreaming after that, not of the stars or Earth, but of fire, of black towers floating above oceans of ash, of a voice, deep, slow, and ancient, whispering words that made my blood vibrate. One night, I woke with a word in my mouth, Sirhavel. I didn't know its meaning. I still don't. But it echoed in my skull for days like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. 2 days later, the drone malfunctioned. It was a Draymari Surveyor Unit, standard Class 7 monitoring drone. Just one of hundreds hovering near the station, scanning for unauthorized tech, heat spikes, anomalous life signs. They kept us under constant surveillance. For our safety, I was walking past the observation bay when it happened. The drone was floating maybe 20 meters out, scanning the waste ducts. I felt angry, no, furious, sick of being watched, sick of being less. The memory of that symbol pulsed behind my eyes. Without thinking, I raised my hand and traced it in the air, finger carving invisible shapes into the stale air of the station. A heat built in my palm, tingling, electric, alive. I whispered the word, Sirhavel. The moment I spoke it, the drone burst into flames. No flash, no explosion. It simply ignited in silence, like the vacuum itself betrayed it. Flames coiled in space, dancing in a way fire shouldn't. It spun wildly, metal liquefying. Before falling into pieces, people screamed. Alarms blared. I stood motionless, heart pounding, hands still raised. I had no idea what I just did. They said it was sabotage, a rogue EMP, maybe a power surge from the ducts. No one could explain it. I kept my mouth shut, but something had awakened in me. Some part of humanity's past we buried under steel and shame. The old stories, the ones about druids and witches, alchemists and sorcerers, they weren't just myths. They were memory. And I was remembering. It didn't take long for the Draymari to notice. The next day, their cruiser Veritatis docked with Kestrel Station, sleek and obsidian, humming with anti-kinetic wards and psychic dampeners. They didn't ask. They never ask. 4 of them arrived, tall, thin, pale like moonlight over water. Black robes with silver threading, faces hidden beneath mirrored masks. They carried no weapons. They didn't need them. They questioned everyone. Witnesses, engineers, maintenance staff, me. When they reached me, I could feel their minds pressing against mine like cold fingers tapping on glass. "You were near the drone when it detonated," one said in perfect standard. "Yes," I answered calm. "What did you see?" "Nothing unusual," I lied. A pause, then a whisper. "You felt it, didn't you?" I met his gaze. Felt what? They didn't press. That scared me more than anything. That night, I snuck back to the breach site. The symbol was gone, scrubbed clean, but I didn't need it anymore. It was inside me now. I traced it again in the air, slower this time, with focus, with purpose, and the air hummed. Reality bent. Not much, just a flicker, a soft ripple, like a curtain blowing in wind, but enough to prove it wasn't a hallucination. This was real, and I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that I was no longer just a maintenance worker on a dying station orbiting a dead world. I was something else, something they thought extinct, a warlock. I don't know what unlocked it. Desperation, bloodline, fate. Maybe Earth whispered one last secret into the void before it died, and I was the one foolish enough to listen. But it's awake now, and I think the stars should be afraid, because I've seen what's out there, and I'm not afraid anymore. The moment the drone burst into flames, I realized everything was changing, but I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. I still remember the cold that flooded my veins after the incident. It wasn't just the fear of getting caught or the endless interrogations by those silent, pale watchers from the Draymari cruiser. It was the growing, gnawing certainty that I was no longer like the others on Kestrel Station. Something inside me had shifted. The symbol haunted me, not just in dreams, but in every waking second. I would find myself tracing its curves in the air without thinking, my fingers moving in patterns older than time itself. It felt like a language encoded deep within my blood, a forgotten song of power that hums in a place no scanner could reach. At night, my dreams grew louder. They weren't ordinary dreams. They were visions, flickering scenes that felt like memories I'd never lived. Black towers floating over ash seas, shadows stretching longer than light, and a voice that was neither male nor female, young nor old. It spoke in syllables I couldn't understand, yet somehow knew the meaning of Seerhavel. I became obsessed with that word. I scoured the station's archives, hunting for anything that could explain it. Old Earth myths? Linguistic oddities? Lost languages? Nothing. It was as if the word had been erased from human history, buried beneath centuries of science and reason. But it was there in me. That obsession became a silent war. During the day, I went about my maintenance duties, patching coolant leaks and replacing broken circuits like any good engineer. But my mind was elsewhere, practicing the motions of the symbol, humming that strange word under my breath. At first, it was just a tingling in my fingertips, then heat, then a strange buzzing that seemed to pulse in the very marrow of my bones. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? They already thought I'd sabotaged the drone. The Draymari kept their eyes on me like a hawk, cold and unblinking. And then it happened again. It was a routine day, the kind where the endless hum of machinery numbs you into forgetting you're trapped in a metal tomb orbiting a dead planet. I was walking through the cargo bay when an alarm blared, a breach in the secondary airlock. The station's security bots scrambled, the red warning lights casting everything in a sinister glow. I ran to the control panel to check the cameras. Outside the airlock floated a Draymari probe, a sleek, silver sphere thrumming with alien tech. It wasn't supposed to be there. The Draymari never sent anything this close without prior notice. My chest tightened. Something in me snapped. I raised my hand. Without consciously planning it, I began to draw the symbol. This time I spoke the word out loud. Seerhavel. The air thickened. The sound around me warped, as if reality was tuning to a different frequency. Then, in the vacuum just beyond the airlock, the probe convulsed. Lights flickered across its surface. Suddenly, it erupted, not with an explosion, but with swirling black smoke that glowed like dying embers. The smoke twisted into shapes, like birds made of flame, before dissipating into the void. The probe was destroyed. People stared. They didn't understand. Neither did I. Afterward, whispers began spreading through the station. Rumors of the mad engineer who set a machine on fire with his bare hands. Some said it was a malfunction. Others said sabotage. But I knew the truth. I had cast a spell. The next few days were a blur. The Draymari intensified their surveillance. Their robed envoys shadowed my every move, their mirrored masks reflecting the dim lights of the station. Their questions grew sharper, their silence more threatening. I felt hunted, but I also felt powerful. One night, Aaron, the overseer who had sent me on that first repair, found me in the observation bay, staring out at the Earth's shattered surface. "You've changed," she said quietly. I turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean?" Her eyes searched mine. "There's something in you, something they don't understand." I swallowed. "I don't know what's happening to me." She hesitated. Maybe you're the key to something old, something that died with Earth." That night, I made a decision. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide. If what I felt, the magic, the power, was real, then I needed to learn it, to control it, to understand it. I started small, drawing the symbol in the air, focusing on the heat pulsing in my hands. At first, I could only spark tiny bursts of light, like static electricity, but warmer, more alive. But every day, it grew stronger. I could feel the fold, an invisible seam in reality where magic still whispered, responding to me. The fold was dangerous, unstable, but it was also the last living link to the Earth that was. Then, one afternoon, disaster struck. We were attacked. Pirates, they said. Raiders from the outer colonies, desperate scavengers willing to kill for scraps. The alarms screamed, and I ran toward the docking bay where they were trying to breach. I was terrified, but then, something inside me ignited. They came in fast, small skiffs, armed with plasma rifles and crude bombs. I could see their faces, scarred, desperate, vicious. They expected a fight with blasters and bullets. They didn't expect a warlock. I raised my hands, and the air trembled. I drew the symbol faster than thought, chanting Sir Havel again and again. The temperature dropped. The air around me shimmered. Shadows lengthened and twisted like living things. Suddenly, the plasma blast they fired slowed, melting mid-flight as if swallowed by invisible flames. Then, with a word, I sent a ripple through the air. It wasn't a blast or a missile. It was a pulse, soft but deadly. It swept over the raiders like a wave of black fire, melting their weapons and armor. They screamed and scrambled, trying to retreat. Some were caught in the shadows I wove. They vanished. When the last skiff burned to embers, silence fell. I stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking. The station was alive with chaos, people screaming, alarms ringing, the Draymari silently watching from the control room. They didn't say anything, but I knew. They were terrified. That night, locked in my tiny cabin, I realized the truth. I wasn't just a relic of a dead planet. I was a weapon, something new, something old, something terrifying. The spell I cast shouldn't have existed. Magic was supposed to be dead, but it wasn't, and I was its last wielder. So here I am, the last human warlock, a ghost in the stars. And the universe? It's about to learn just how dangerous ghosts can be. The word warlock doesn't mean what it used to. Back on Earth, before it died, magic was a story told to children. Fairy tales, myths, legends whispered in the dark. We had technology, clean, precise, scientific. No place for the old ways. No place for spells or curses. Not anymore. But out here, among the stars and the ashes, the old world refuses to stay dead. After the raid, everything changed. The station was on edge. The Draymari tightened their grip like a python squeezing a rat. Patrols increased, surveillance cameras multiplied, and every comm channel hummed with tension. They didn't speak openly about me, but the fear in their eyes said enough. I was a wild card, a loose thread in their neat, controlled fabric. And yet, no one could touch me, not directly. I hid in plain sight. My daily work continued, fixing the cooling systems, checking airlock seals, monitoring life support arrays. But my nights were spent in the small, dusty library tucked deep inside the station, a forgotten archive of old Earth lore, smuggled and saved by desperate souls before the collapse. Pages cracked beneath my fingers, faded ink telling stories of power and sacrifice, of worlds where men and women wielded forces beyond the comprehension of machines. I was looking for answers. How could a human, one born after the fall, orbiting a burnt-out planet, suddenly command the fold. How could I bend reality with a word and a gesture? Then I found it. A journal. Old, leather-bound, almost crumbling with age. The cover bore a symbol, the same symbol I'd seen beneath the coolant panel. Inside, scrawled in tight, looping script, were notes from a woman named Leora. She called herself a warlock, a last keeper of ancient power. She lived centuries ago, when Earth was still whole, fighting a secret war against shadows that lurked beyond reality. Her words echoed my own experience. She wrote of the fold, a tear in the fabric of existence, a place where magic could seep through if you knew how to reach it. But she warned of danger. The fold was a living thing. It could be bent, twisted, used, but it could also consume. I was staring at her words when the lights flickered. Kestrel Station never lost power like that, never without warning. The overhead panels dimmed, then surged back. A low hum vibrated through the bulkheads, different from the usual drone of machinery. Cold. Wrong. I froze. A new presence had arrived. The Draymari were the first to notice. Their scanners flared, monitors blinking wild red alerts. The robed figures gathered in the control room, whispering rapidly in their strange, sibilant tongue. I tried to stay calm, but the air around me thickened like syrup. The fold was stirring. I moved cautiously toward the observation bay. The viewport faced Earth's corpse, a swirling mass of ash and ruin. But something else was out there. A shadow, not just darkness, but something alive. It flickered at the edge of the station's sensors. An impossible shape, warping space and light like a hole in the stars themselves. My heart slammed in my chest. The fold was bleeding. The station's alarm screamed. Crew scrambled. The Draymari raised their hands, chanting low words that made the air vibrate with tension. I felt the pulse of the fold thrumming in my veins, urging me to act. I stepped forward, drawing the symbol in the air, fingers trembling but steady. The word, Seer Havel, passed my lips like a prayer. The world warped again. The shadow writhed, twisting into forms that felt like living nightmares. Beasts with eyes that burned like dying suns, claws that scraped against reality's edge. But I didn't falter. I wove the magic like a loom, pulling threads of the fold into patterns of light and flame. The shadow hissed, retreating into the void. When the danger passed, silence fell. The station's crew stared at me, not with fear, but with something new. Respect? Oh, or was it dread? Later, in the dim glow of my cabin, I realized what had happened. The fold wasn't just a source of power. It was a battleground. There were others, beings made of shadow and malice, lurking in the spaces between stars, waiting for cracks to widen. And I was the shield, but I was also a target. The Draymari came to me again that night. They didn't speak of punishment or exile. Instead, they offered a choice. Join them, help them control the fold, or be destroyed. I laughed. They thought they could bind what they didn't understand. But the fold answered only to those with the courage to face the shadows. So here I am, caught between machines that rule the stars and the ancient magic waking inside me. A warlock, a guardian, and a weapon forged from humanity's ashes. And the shadows? They're coming. The Draymari didn't come with threats or bluster. No loud proclamations. No dramatic warnings or grandstanding. Instead, they arrived with cold inevitability, the kind of silence that presses into your chest and makes every breath feel like it's measured, controlled, like the calm before the storm. When they first cornered me in the narrow corridors of Kestrel Station, I knew this was it. The moment where my life would bend, one way or another. The envoy was different from the rest, where the others wore the smooth, featureless masks and loose black robes. This one's mask was etched with swirling patterns of silver and blue, a symbol of rank or something else. I wasn't sure. The figure's movements were slow and deliberate, every step measured, as if they were weighing the very air around them. Their voice was soft, melodic, almost hypnotic. They spoke in the universal tongue, the trade language forced upon all humans under the Draymari sphere of influence. But there was an otherworldly cadence, a subtle echo that vibrated beneath every word. You are anomalous, they said, eyes hidden behind the reflective mask, a variable we did not predict. I had expected anger or accusation. Instead, there was curiosity, something like respect. I don't understand, I said, trying to steady my voice. What do you want from me? The envoy tilted their head slightly, as if considering whether to reveal a secret. Then, the ultimatum came, smooth and cold. You possess power beyond your comprehension. Power linked to the fold, a rift in reality that threatens the balance of the cosmos. This power must be controlled. They stepped closer. Join us, the Order of the Fold. Aid us in stabilizing the fractures between worlds, or be deemed a threat and eliminated. It was an offer, but it wasn't a choice. I stared back, the weight of their words settling like a stone in my gut. Join the Draymari, an empire of cold logic and ruthless control? Serve their inscrutable agenda and give up the last shred of freedom? Or be hunted, destroyed like some dangerous pest? The station felt smaller, the walls closing in. Every instinct screamed to run, hide, resist. But deep inside, something else stirred. Power. Not just the raw fire of the fold, but the sense that I was the last thread holding back a tide of darkness. I wasn't going to let that go without a fight. So I asked, what happens if I refuse? The envoy's voice was a whisper now. Then you become the enemy of all, and we will hunt you until you are no more. That night, I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my cabin, the symbol from the drone repair glowing faintly in my mind. The choice was impossible. Join them and lose myself, or fight and be alone. But I knew one thing. The fold was waking, and whatever it was that stirred in those shadows beyond the stars, it wasn't waiting for me to decide. I spent the next few days carefully balancing the line between compliance and rebellion. Outwardly, I was just another engineer, fixing panels and monitoring systems. Inside, I was a warlock in training, practicing the ancient signs, coaxing sparks from empty air. The Draymari watched, but they gave me space, waiting for me to choose. I began to explore the fold deeper. The journal from Leora had clues, fragments of rituals, warnings about binding shadows and unlocking realms. Some spells could bend time, others could heal or destroy, but all came at a cost. Every time I reached out, I felt the fold push back, like an ocean's current trying to pull me under. But with each success, I grew stronger and more dangerous. One evening, while experimenting in the observation bay, I sensed a presence, not hostile this time, but curious. A whisper, a shimmer at the edge of perception. I reached out, daring to touch the edge of the fold. For a brief moment, I saw a figure, a silhouette cloaked in darkness, eyes glowing with starfire. Then it vanished. Was it a friend? An enemy? A warning? I didn't know. But the fold was not empty. It was alive. Then the raid came again. This time, it wasn't pirates or scavengers. It was the Draymari themselves. They sent soldiers, clad in black armor, armed with weapons designed to disrupt fold energy. They wanted me to surrender. I refused. The battle was brutal. I called upon the fold, weaving shadows and fire into walls of energy, hurling blasts that warped reality itself. The station shook under the strain of our clash. For the first time, I realized what it truly meant to be a warlock. But the Draymari had numbers, and they had technology. In the end, I escaped by the narrowest margin, slipping through maintenance tunnels, cloaked by the fold's shifting veil. Now, hunted and alone, I know this much. The Draymari won't stop. The fold won't wait. And I must decide, will I become the weapon they want, or the shield humanity needs? And somewhere, in the dark folds of space, shadows are watching, waiting. The station's hum had shifted, not in pitch or tone, but in something deeper, an undercurrent of energy that hummed beneath my skin. I could feel it in the air, thick and electric, as if the fold itself was waking inside Kestrel Station. Since the Dremori's ultimatum and the raid, everything was different. The fragile peace was shattered, replaced by a tension that crackled like static before a storm. I had no choice but to dig deeper. The Journal of Leora, the ancient warlock who'd walked this path before me, had become my obsession. Her words weren't just stories. They were a map, a guide to harnessing the fold, to bending it without breaking myself in the process. But the cost was steep. Every time I reached into the fold, a part of me changed. The boundary between what I was and what I could become blurred. That night, I sat alone in the observation bay, the window framing the void outside, dead earth spinning silently below. I held the journal open, tracing the faded ink with trembling fingers. Then I heard it, a voice, not in the room, but inside my head, soft, like a breeze, yet sharp with clarity. You seek answers, child of earth. But the fold is not a tool. It is a living force. I froze. The voice was not human, not fully. It was ancient, echoing with power older than stars. Who are you? I whispered. There was a pause, Then the voice answered, I am called many things. A guardian, a sentinel, a shadow born in the fold's depths. The air shifted around me. Light flickered. I saw a figure, a silhouette woven from starlight and shadow, hovering just beyond the glass. You have the mark, it said, the bond to the fold. But you are weak. You must make a pact. A pact. The words sent chills down my spine. What kind of pact? I asked, heart pounding. To bind the fold's power, you must give yourself wholly. Your soul, your mind, your will. The figure's voice was gentle but insistent. In return, you will gain strength beyond mortal kin. But the price is high, your freedom. I hesitated. To lose myself, to surrender control, it sounded like a curse. But what choice did I have? The Draymari hunted me. The fold stirred with dark hunger. If I didn't embrace this power fully, I would be consumed. I will make the pact, I said, voice barely audible. The figure extended a hand, shimmering with cosmic light. The moment I touched it, a surge of energy tore through me, hot and cold all at once. Visions flooded my mind, worlds folding in on themselves, shadows creeping across stars, echoes of battles fought in realms beyond time. I saw Leora. She was standing at the edge of a chasm, wielding the fold like a blade, fighting off creatures that defied description. Her voice whispered in my mind, strength without sacrifice is meaningless. To protect, you must first surrender. When the visions faded, I was alone again, but I felt different. The fold was no longer a distant force. It coursed through me, alive and aware. Over the next days, I tested my new power. I could weave light and shadow into barriers, summon bursts of energy that bent reality, and even glimpse moments just beyond the present. But with every use, the voice returned, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a roar, reminding me of the pact's cost. Then the Draymari returned, not with soldiers this time, but emissaries. They brought an offer, an alliance. You have accepted the fold, their leaders said, voice cold and calculating. Join us, and together we will rule the fractures of reality. I laughed. Their ambition was vast, but they misunderstood one thing. The fold answers to no one but those willing to pay its price. I serve the fold, I said, not you. The emissaries left, but their threat lingered. That night, I dreamed of Leora again. She stood in the ruins of Earth, a warlock surrounded by shadows. Beware, she said. The fold does not forgive betrayal. I woke with a start. The war was no longer just between me and the Draymari. It was a battle for the very soul of the fold and mine. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the stars, the shadows gathered, waiting for the warlock to falter. The silence in the command hub was deafening. Not the kind of silence that follows peace, but the one that follows a storm, thick with tension and laced with mistrust. The hum of the station's machinery seemed distant, almost muted, as if even the cold steel walls were holding their breath. After the pact, after the Draymari emissaries' rejection and threats, I should have been ready for what came next. But betrayal, I learned, was a sharper blade than any enemy's weapon. It started small, subtle shifts in how the crew looked at me. Whispers caught just out of earshot. Glances that lingered longer than they should. The crew was fracturing. Paranoia was setting in. And in a place like Kestrel Station, paranoia was deadly. Loyalty was a luxury none of us could afford. My closest ally, Jalen, the station's chief engineer and one of the few people I truly trusted, was acting strange. He avoided me in the corridors. Our late-night talks about the fold and the Dremery's intentions dried up into curt nods. And then, the message arrived, an encrypted data packet hidden deep inside the station's archives. It was from Jalen. Meet me in the old storage bay. Midnight. Alone. The message was short, urgent. I had no choice but to go. The storage bay was a cold, cavernous space at the far end of the station. Old crates and forgotten tech lined the walls. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick and suffocating. I arrived first, heart pounding. Minutes stretched into an eternity before Jalen slipped through the door, his face pale and drawn. You shouldn't have come, he whispered. Why? What's going on, Jalen? He hesitated, then pulled a data chip from his pocket, one that glowed faintly with encrypted code. I don't know who to trust anymore, he said, but I found this, and it changes everything. I plugged the chip into my portable console. Files and images streamed across the screen. Intercepted communications, Draymari plans, and a list of names, including mine. You're marked, Jalen said. The Draymari don't just want you to join them. They want you dead. I felt the blood drain from my face. Why? What have I done? You're a threat to their control. Jalen answered grimly. Your power, the pact you made with the Fold, it's unpredictable. They fear it. But if they want me dead, why warn me? I asked, suspicion crawling up my spine. Because, Jalen's voice broke, I'm part of it. I've been feeding them info. I never wanted to hurt you, but they threatened my family. The room spun. Betrayal wasn't just a whisper on the wind. It was standing before me, drenched in guilt. You lied, I said, voice shaking. I didn't have a choice, Jalen pleaded. But I'm done. I want out. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Together, we devised a plan. We would expose the Dremery spy network on Kestrel Station. We would root out those who worked against us from within. But time was running out. Over the next days, I used my warlock powers to probe deeper into the Fold, seeking glimpses of hidden truths. Shadows whispered secrets, but every answer came with a price. The voice that dwelled in my mind, the Pact's echo, warned me to tread carefully. One night, as I meditated to strengthen my bond with the Fold, the shadowy figure from before appeared again. You risk everything, it said. I was burning with cosmic fire. I have no choice, I replied. They hunt me. They betrayed me. I'm alone. The figure's gaze softened, almost sad. The Fold is never kind to the lonely. You must build trust or be consumed. That message haunted me because trust was scarce. Then, a signal came through the station's encrypted channels. A warning. The Dremery had found us. The spy network had been compromised. The raid was coming. Panic surged through the crew. I gathered those still loyal, a ragtag band of engineers, medics, and security officers willing to fight for survival. We prepared for the worst. The Dremery strike was swift and merciless. They swept through the station's corridors like shadows made flesh, armed with technology designed to counter my Fold powers. I fought alongside my small band, calling upon the Fold to shield and strike. The air crackled with energy, reality bending under the strain of our clash. But the station wasn't built for war. Explosions rocked the walls. Power flickered and died. In the chaos, Jalen was taken. I couldn't save him. As he was dragged away by the Dremery soldiers, his eyes met mine, a silent apology and a plea for forgiveness. I swallowed the pain and kept fighting. The raid ended with heavy losses. Kestrel Station was crippled, and I was marked, not just by the Dremery, but by my own scars. Alone once again, I realized something vital. The war was no longer about power or survival. It was about trust. If I wanted to win, I had to build alliances, even if that meant risking betrayal again. And somewhere deep in the Fold, I sensed a growing darkness, a shadow that was waiting for me to falter. Because in this war, shadows don't just hide enemies, they become them. After the Dremery's ruthless strike on Kestrel Station, I was left with two things: scars etched deep in my flesh, and scars far deeper within my soul. The physical wounds, bruised ribs, a shattered shoulder, a limp that would never fully heal, were a constant reminder that survival had come at a price. But those were nothing compared to the betrayal I had endured and the loneliness that gnawed at me. The Warlock's pact had granted me power beyond mortal kin, but that power was a double-edged sword. It demanded sacrifice, demanded that I surrender pieces of myself to the Fold's endless hunger. And now, standing amidst the ruins of what was once my home, I was forced to confront the hardest truth of all. I could not do this alone. It was time to forge alliances, fragile, uneasy alliances with those I could trust. And trust was a scarce commodity on Kestrel Station, scarred by suspicion, fear, and loss. I met with Captain Arlen, the station's highest-ranking officer who had survived the attack. A grizzled veteran with more years under his belt than I cared to count, Arlen was a man shaped by wars of another age. His eyes were sharp, his demeanor unyielding, but beneath his stern exterior was a pragmatism that might be our salvation. "We need a plan," I said, watching the steady hum of the damaged command console light up the darkened room. Arlen nodded, rubbing his chin. "This station isn't what it was, but we can still hold the Fold Gate. If the Dremery breach that, it's over." The Fold Gate, a shimmering portal that was the station's heart and soul, a gateway to other dimensions, to the Fold itself. It was what made Kestrel Station invaluable and a prize the Dremery sought desperately. "We'll fortify the gate," I said, "but that won't be enough. The Dremery have spies here. We need to root them out." That meant trust, and trust meant risk. Together, we called a council of survivors: engineers, medics, security officers, everyone who had a stake in the station's survival. The room was tense. eyes darting suspiciously, whispers rising and falling like a tide of unease. I know many of you have doubts, I began, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. But we face a common enemy. If we don't stand united, we'll fall divided. Murmurs echoed, but Captain Arlen's steady presence helped hold the room together. Then, Jalen's name came up. A bitter silence fell. The man who had betrayed me, who had sold secrets to the Draymari to save his family. Was he still with us? Could he be trusted? I say we execute him. One voice hissed from the back. No, I interrupted. Jalen risked everything to warn me. He wants to make amends. There was skepticism, understandable skepticism. But in war, people change. People survive. We need him, Arlen said quietly. But we watch him closely. It was a fragile truce, but it was a start. Days passed in a blur of preparations. I trained with Jalen, pushing my mastery of the fold further. The warlocks packed whispered warnings, but also encouragement. The voice in my mind had become a constant companion, at times a tormentor, at times a guide. One night, while meditating near the fold gate, I felt it, a surge of energy unlike anything before. The gate shimmered wildly, shadows twisting within its depths. I reached out with the fold. Visions burst forth, flashes of worlds collapsing, stars consumed by shadow, and at the center, a figure cloaked in darkness, wielding the fold like a weapon. The Draymari. But more than that, I saw betrayal. From within, someone close. The weight of that vision settled heavy in my chest. I was caught in a crucible of trust and doubt. Who was the traitor? I confided in Jalen, who listened intently, his face grim. We need to find the source, he said, but we can't do it alone. So we formed a small team, a mix of loyalists and those willing to fight for the station's future. Together, we combed through archives, monitored communications, and set traps for the Draymari spies. Each step was dangerous. Every shadow could hide a knife. And then, the unthinkable happened. One of our own, Commander Rylas, a trusted security officer, was caught in the act, transmitting data to the Draymari. Betrayal cut deep. Rylas was taken, and under interrogation, he revealed the names of others, a network woven through the station like a cancer. The station's heart was bleeding, but there was no time to mourn. The Draymari were preparing for another assault, one that would tear the station apart if we were not ready. I stood by the fold gate with Captain Arlen and Jalen, the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical force. We hold this line, I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. No matter what, the battle that followed was fierce. The fold flared with raw power as I wove shields and unleashed bursts of energy. The Draymari were relentless, their technology designed to counter my warlock powers. But we had something they didn't, humanity. The fierce will to survive, to protect what was ours. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of the shadowy figure from the fold, my mysterious guardian. Trust, it whispered, as if reminding me of the lesson I struggled to learn. In the end, we held the fold gate, but the cost was high. Friends lost, trust broken, and the shadow of betrayal lingered. I realized that the true battle was not just against the Draymari, but against the darkness within ourselves. Because in this war, trust was the crucible that forged heroes or shattered them, and I was ready to be forged. The quiet after the storm was deceptive. The Draymari attack had left Kestrel Station scarred, but the wounds ran far deeper than the damaged corridors and flickering consoles. The real battle was now within, a battle against fear, suspicion, and the shadows of our own history. I sat alone in the dim glow of the observation deck, staring out at the endless void beyond. Stars flickered like distant promises, each one a beacon of hope or a reminder of what we had lost. The fold gate stood behind me, dormant for now, but pulsing faintly, as if alive. I was haunted by memories, not just my own, but those of the countless souls who had walked this path before me. The Warlock's pact wasn't new. It was ancient, older than the Draymari, older than the fold itself. In the silence, the voice came again. Do you want to understand? It asked, the shadowy figure I had come to both fear and trust. Yes, I whispered. The fold's power surged through me, drawing me deep into its embrace. My consciousness slipped away from the observation deck and into a realm beyond space and time, the very fabric of the fold. There, I saw visions of a forgotten war, civilizations that had risen and fallen, empires shattered by the very power I now wielded. I saw the first warlocks, beings who had made pacts with the fold to protect their worlds, to shield their people from annihilation. But those pacts came with a cost. Power could corrupt, and those who sought to control the fold had unleashed devastation beyond reckoning. Among the ruins, I glimpsed a name, a warning etched into the cosmic tapestry. Elian, a warlock unlike any other, one who had sought to dominate the fold itself. The Dremery's obsession with the fold suddenly made sense. They weren't just hunters. They were seekers of a power that could remake the universe. But Elian's fate was a cautionary tale. He had been consumed by the very darkness he sought to command. I awoke with a start, the echoes of that ancient war still ringing in my mind. The past was not just history. It was a mirror, and I saw my own reflection. The danger of power without control, the thin line between savior and destroyer. Determined to understand more, I reached out to the station's archives. Hidden deep within the databanks were records left by explorers and warlocks long gone. Fragments of knowledge that might help me control the fold's fury without losing myself. I spent hours poring over those dusty files, deciphering symbols and ancient scripts. Among them, I found a message from a warlock named Leora. She spoke of balance, the harmony between the fold's chaos and order, of a ritual, the Veil of Concord, that could bind a warlock's power, tempering it with clarity and strength. But the ritual was lost. Fragments remained scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places the Dremery might already be searching for. I knew what I had to do. To survive, to protect Kestrel Station, and to confront the Dremery threat, I needed to find those fragments. And to do that, I needed allies. Jalen and Captain Arlen were with me, but we needed more. Explorers, scholars, warriors willing to risk everything for a cause greater than themselves. I sent out encrypted signals, calling for aid from distant outposts, hidden colonies, and rogue factions. Days passed. Then, replies came. Voices from the edge of known space. Among them was Dr. Saravos, an exoarchaeologist renowned for her work on ancient civilizations. She had studied the fold's influence on worlds lost to time and had theories that aligned with my visions. We arranged a meeting in the station's damaged hangar bay. When she arrived, I was struck by her presence, calm, assured, with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless secrets. "We don't have much time," she said. "The Dremery are moving fast. If they find the Veil of Concord before you, it could mean the end." Together, we mapped out our quest. The first fragment lay on a forgotten moon orbiting a dead star, a place called Nix 7. But the journey was perilous. Nix 7 was deep in Dremery-controlled space. We assembled a team, a diverse group bound by determination. There was Kale, a pilot whose reputation for daring was matched only by his loyalty. Mira, a former Dremery prisoner who had escaped and sought revenge. And Torin, a grizzled ex-soldier with a sharp mind and a sharper blade. We left Kestrel Station under the cover of darkness, the fold gate's faint pulse a reminder of what we were fighting for. As we traveled through the void, I wrestled with the warlock's voice inside my head. It warned of danger, whispered temptations, and offered power, but always at a price. One night, while Kale piloted the ship through a meteor shower, I confronted the voice. "Why me?" I asked. Why was I chosen? The answer was both simple and terrifying. "Because you were human," it said. "Because your kind is unpredictable, resilient, and fierce. Humanity's greatest strength, our capacity to adapt, to fight against impossible odds, was why the fold had chosen me." But that meant the Dremery feared us most. And I knew then that the path ahead would test not just my power, but my very humanity. Nix 7 loomed ahead, a barren, desolate world cloaked in shadows. The first fragment of the Veil of Concord awaited, and so did the Dremery. As we prepared to descend, I steeled myself, because the echoes of the past were no longer distant. They were coming alive, and I would face them head-on. Nix 7 hung before us like a silent, brooding sentinel, a dead moon in the outer reaches of Dremery-controlled space. Its surface was a vast expanse of jagged rock and shadowed craters, devoid of life and mercy. The readings we gathered during approach hinted at something hidden beneath that barren shell, an ancient ruin that held the first fragment of the Veil of Concord. The ship's engines hummed steadily as Kale expertly guided us into orbit. The crew was tense, the air thick with anticipation and unease. No one spoke much. We all understood the gravity of what awaited us. "You ever get used to this kind of silence?" Mira asked softly, breaking the quiet as she stared out the viewport. Only when I'm not thinking about what's waiting for us, I admitted. The Draymari presence in the system was a constant threat, and Nix 7's isolation was both a blessing and a curse. Hidden away in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, we had the advantage of surprise, but the risk of being completely cut off. We ran final checks on our gear, the exosuits for harsh environments, plasma weapons calibrated, and a portable fold shield generator, my own addition to protect us against the unknown. Torin checked the weapons cache one last time, his weathered hand steady. Let's just find the fragment and get out. I nodded. Simple in theory, but nothing about this mission would be simple. When Kale maneuvered the ship to a rough landing site near the ruins, the hatch hissed open, spilling cold, stale air into the cabin. The gravity here was weak, and stepping outside felt like walking on a moon trapped in eternal twilight. We moved in formation, scanning with every step, the ruins looming ahead like the bones of some ancient leviathan. Cracked pillars, broken archways, and glyphs etched deep into the stone. Remnants of a civilization long gone, but not forgotten. Sarah was the first to spot it, a glowing sigil on a monolithic obelisk, pulsating faintly with an energy that matched the fold's frequency. This is it, she whispered. As I approached, the warlock's voice stirred within me, urging caution and focus. The fold hummed in response to the sigil's energy, a sign that the fragment was near. We began the delicate process of extraction. Sarah translated the glyphs, guiding us through the ritual to unlock the fragment's containment field. The moment the fragment was free, the ground trembled. A warning. We weren't alone. From the shadows of the ruined city, Draymari hunters emerged, sleek, armored warriors with eyes like molten metal and weapons crackling with alien energy. They had tracked us here. The ambush was swift and brutal. Our team scattered, dodging blasts that tore through stone and silence alike. I raised a shield of pure fold energy, deflecting a volley aimed directly at us. Torin fired back with precision, covering Mira as she maneuvered to flank the attackers. But the Draymari fought with a brutal efficiency that sent chills down my spine. One of them breached our defenses and lunged at me, a blur of speed and lethal intent. I summoned the fold, weaving it into a blade of shimmering energy. The strike landed true, but the cost was a surge of pain and fatigue unlike anything I'd felt before. The Warlock's pact was demanding more than I was ready to give. Jalen's voice crackled over comms, urging us to regroup. We need to fall back, he shouted. They're more prepared than we thought. Retreat was the only option. Back aboard the ship, we were battered, but alive. The fragment pulsed in its containment unit, a fragile beacon of hope amid the wreckage. But the encounter had shaken us. We had underestimated the Dremori's reach and resolve. That night, as the team gathered in the ship's common area, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down hard. We can't keep running, I said, meeting each of their eyes. If we're going to stop the Draymari, we have to fight, and fight smart. Sarah nodded. The fragments are powerful, but incomplete. Alone, they won't save us. We need the rest, and we need to understand the full ritual. Mira, her voice steady despite the weariness, added, and we need to expose the traitors. The Dremori's network is bigger than we thought. Arlen and Jalen exchanged grim looks, both aware that the station was more vulnerable than ever. I felt the Warlock's presence stir within me, a reminder that the pact was not just a source of power, but a burden I carried for all humanity. We'll find the next fragment, I promised, and we'll face whatever comes next together. But as I spoke those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of Nix 7 were only the beginning. The Draymari had drawn blood, and the hunt was far from over. And somewhere, lurking in the darkness, the echoes of an ancient power were awakening. The stars outside the viewport of our ship weren't just distant suns anymore. They were markers on a battlefield that stretched across the void. Every flicker of light was a reminder that the final act was near, that our fragile coalition of survivors and seekers was racing against a darkness older than we could imagine. We had gathered the fragments of the Veil of Concord, each piece a sliver of ancient power, whispering secrets of balance and control. But the cost had been high. Friends lost, wounds both physical and spiritual, and the constant weight of the Fold's voice threading through my mind like a living thing, sometimes a guide, sometimes a tormentor. The Dremori's presence had grown bolder. Intelligence reports confirmed a massive fleet amassing near the shattered system of Kairos, the site where the last fragment was rumored to be hidden. The final confrontation was inevitable. Inside the command deck, the atmosphere was tense but resolute. Jalen adjusted his comms gear. Sensors show enemy fleet movements accelerating. They're mobilizing faster than anticipated. Captain Arlen paced slowly. This isn't just a raid anymore. They want to break the Fold's hold on the galaxy to claim its power for their own. Sarah, our exoarchaeologist and scholar of ancient lore, stood beside me. The ritual to complete the Veil of Concord is delicate. If we fail to synchronize the fragments properly, it could backfire catastrophically. I swallowed the knot of fear tightening in my chest. This is it, I said. We either stop them here, or we watch everything we fought for, everything humanity is crumble. Preparing for war. The crew worked like a well-oiled machine, preparing the ship and weapons for the battle that was to come. Kale ran simulations with precision that was almost eerie, the hum of engines growing louder with every passing minute. Mira and Torin reviewed combat plans and security protocols, their faces grim but determined. As I walked among them, the warlock's voice whispered, a reminder of the duality within me. Power demands sacrifice, balance demands strength. That duality was my burden and my weapon. The approach to Kairos. We arrived in Kairos' orbit under the shadow of a dying star, its crimson light casting long, sinister shadows over the shattered remnants of ancient cities and broken moons. The Draymari fleet was already there. Countless warships, sleek and deadly, arranged in formations designed to choke out any chance of escape or victory. I gathered the team in the strategy room. This isn't just about firepower, I said. We need to use the Fold, but carefully. The ritual to bind the fragments must be precise. Any mistake could tear a hole in space-time or worse. Sarah outlined the sequence, activating each fragment at precise intervals, channeling the Fold's energy through me as the conduit. We'll face overwhelming odds, she warned. But if we succeed, the Veil of Concord will create a barrier, a shield of balance that can repel the Dremry's dark influence. The plan was risky. Every second counted. Into the heart of battle. As we descended toward Cairo's surface in our assault shuttles, the battle erupted in a thunderous storm of light and sound. Lasers screamed through the void. Explosions rocked the atmosphere. The Draymari fought with savage efficiency. Kale's piloting kept us steady as we weaved through debris and enemy fire. We're clear for drop, he called out. We landed amidst ruins cracked by ancient cataclysms and fresh fire. Torin, Mira, and I moved out, carrying the fragments carefully in reinforced cases. The warlock's voice was louder now, urging me forward, stronger, more insistent. We fought through Draymari patrols, each engagement a brutal test of skill and will. Myra's sharpshooting kept enemies at bay. Torin's tactical instincts saved us from traps and ambushes, but the cost was clear. Jalen was wounded, a deep burn from a plasma blast that wouldn't heal until after the battle. Captain Arlen coordinated reinforcements over comms, but time was running out. The ritual. At the heart of Kairos stood the ancient temple, a monolithic structure carved from iridescent stone, etched with runes that shimmered under the dying star's light. Sarah began the activation sequence, her hands steady despite the chaos around us. Fragments hummed with power as I raised my hands, feeling the Fold surge through me, threading through every fragment. The energy was intoxicating, overwhelming. I could feel the fabric of reality bending, folding around us. The warlock's voice turned sharp, almost desperate. Control it. Balance. Remember, I focused, drawing on every lesson, every memory of humanity's resilience, our hope, our fear, our unbreakable will. The Veil of Concord began to take shape, a radiant barrier rippling with energy, pushing back against the Dremry's assault. The turning tide. The Draymari faltered, their fleets advanced stalling under the barrier's weight. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. But then the temple shook. A surge of dark energy erupted, Elian's legacy trying to consume what we had built. The warlock's voice screamed a warning. I pushed harder, pouring everything into the Fold. The barrier shone brighter, until the dark energy shattered against it like a wave against a cliff. The Draymari retreated, broken and beaten. Aftermath. The silence after battle was surreal. The crew gathered, exhausted but victorious. Jalen, though wounded, grinned weakly. We actually did it. Sarah looked at me, eyes shining with awe. You didn't just wield the Fold. You became its guardian. The warlock's voice softened, no longer torment, but peace. You were humanity's echo in the cosmos. Reflection. Standing once more on the observation deck, I looked out at the same stars, yet somehow different. The universe was vast and filled with dangers I could barely imagine. But humanity was something else. We were unpredictable, resilient, and fierce. The Warlock's pact was no longer just a burden. It was a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, light could prevail, and that humanity's story was just beginning.